You can change the past. And no, this isn't science fiction. It's quantum physics. In 1978, physicist John Wheeler proposed an experiment so strange, it almost broke reality. An experiment where decisions made in the present could determine what happened in the past. What if I told you that your future is already influencing your memories? What if time, the thing we trust most, isn't real? Because in the quantum world, cause doesn't always come before effect. And the very act of observing something can change not only what it is, but what it was. In today's video, we're diving into the most disturbing idea in physics, that past, present, and future are not separate. They're all happening at once. This isn't just a thought experiment. This is based on real data, real labs, and it's tearing down the way we understand time, choice, and reality itself. So buckle up, because once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And hey, if you want YouTube to show you more ideas like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. It tells the algorithm you like to think differently. Let's step back for a second. Time feels obvious. There's a past. It already happened. There's a present. It's happening now. And the future? It's out there, waiting for us to reach it. But what if that's just a story your brain tells to make sense of something it can't understand? Because at the quantum level, the scale of atoms, photons, and particles, that story starts to fall apart. And it all begins with a deceptively simple question. What happens when you look at something? In the 20th century, quantum physicists realized that particles behave differently when they're being observed, like light deciding whether to act like a wave or a particle based on what you expect to see. It's called the observer effect, and it shook science to its core. But then came John Wheeler. He took things further, dangerously further. He asked, what if your observation not only changes the present, but rewrites the past? This led to what's now known as the delayed choice experiment. It's real. It's been repeated in labs from MIT to CERN, and the results are clear. Particles seem to decide how they behaved in the past based on what you do in the future. Think about that. Your choice today can change what happened yesterday, which raises a terrifying question. If the past depends on the present, does the present also depend on the future? What even is time? To really grasp what's going on, we need to walk through the actual experiment. And it starts with something strangely beautiful, the double-slit experiment. Here's the setup. Imagine you have a barrier with two slits. Behind it, a screen that detects light. And in front of the slits, you fire particles, like photons, one at a time. If you don't measure which slit the photon goes through, it behaves like a wave, spreading out, interfering with itself, and creating a pattern of multiple bands on the screen. But if you add a detector to observe which slit the photon goes through, suddenly it stops acting like a wave. It behaves like a particle, and the interference pattern vanishes. Just by observing it, you've changed its nature. That's already bizarre. But Wheeler wanted to push this to the edge. He asked, what if we decide whether or not to observe what only after the photon has already passed the slits? This is the delayed choice experiment. It works like this. A single photon is fired toward a pair of slits, but this time, the decision to observe is delayed. It's made after the photon should have already chosen a path. What do you think happens? Shockingly, the photon retroactively behaves based on your delayed choice. If you decide to measure, it acted like a particle. If you don't, it acted like a wave, even though the event already happened. It's as if reality is waiting to know what you'll do before deciding what it was. And it gets worse. Physicists started designing even more complex versions, like the quantum eraser experiment, where information about a photon's path is erased after detection, and the interference pattern reappears. It's like the universe can undo a decision if you choose to forget it. What does that even mean? It means time might not flow in one direction. It might be more like a web where what you do now ripples backward. And that breaks something deep inside us. Because we were taught to believe in causality. A causes B. The past causes the present causes the future. But here, the arrow of time gets blurry. The effect seems to come before the cause. This is where retrocausality enters the picture. Some physicists, like Hugh Price and Ken Wharton, argue that instead of fighting the weirdness of quantum mechanics, we should accept what it tells us, that the future can influence the past. They suggest that quantum events are consistent across time, past, present, and future coordinate to produce what we see. In other words, the universe isn't being written frame by frame. It's being negotiated across all time in both directions. Mind-bending, right? But it gets even more strange when you factor in the role of the observer. Because in quantum physics, it's not just about particles and detectors. It's about you. A conscious being who decides what to look at. Your choice changes the outcome. And in some interpretations, your awareness may be the key that locks reality into place. This leads us to one of the most controversial ideas in physics, that consciousness isn't just watching the universe, it's part of how it works. Now, some dismiss this as philosophical fluff. But let's slow down. We know observation collapses wave functions. We know delayed choices can affect earlier outcomes. So, what happens when your mind makes a choice? What if that mental act, that invisible intention, is more than just a side effect of your brain? Could consciousness be fundamental? Some physicists, like Carlo Rovelli, approach it from a different angle. In his theory of relational quantum mechanics, reality doesn't exist independently. It exists in relation to the observer, meaning there is no objective universe, only interactions, only relations. So if you remove the observer, you remove the observed, and that loops us right back to time. If reality is relative, and if observation decides the past, then what is your timeline made of? It's not just memory. It's not just the ticking of a clock. It might be a fragile agreement negotiated between your mind, your expectations, and the fabric of the universe. Let that sink in, because now we're not just talking about experiments in labs. We're talking about you, your choices, your regrets, your idea of what really happened. What if none of it is fixed? What if time isn't a line, but a story, and you're the one choosing how to read it? Let's imagine a world where time doesn't flow from past to future, but instead, everything, every moment, just is. Not was, not will be, just is. This is the world according to block universe theory, a model where time is a dimension, like space. In this view, all events, from the birth of stars to your next thought, already exist in a 4D structure. You don't move through time, you're embedded in it. Now pair that with quantum retrocausality. It suggests that your choices may light up parts of the block universe, collapsing certain paths, making others fade. And in that sense, the future isn't waiting to happen. It's already there, watching you back. This might sound like determinism, like everything is fixed and you're just playing a role. But here's the twist. Your choices still matter, because they're part of the structure. They're woven into the very shape of time. So is free will an illusion? Not exactly. If time is a tapestry, then free will is the thread you experience as you move through it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to control the timeline. We're supposed to live it, moment by moment, as if we were discovering it for the first time. But here's the wild part. Some physicists now propose that particles don't just react to past conditions. They also respond to future boundary conditions, like a river that flows from both directions, meeting in the middle. This idea has roots in Feynman's path integral, where every possible path is calculated, including those that go backward in time. Why would nature calculate every path, including backward ones, unless something deeper was going on? Unless time isn't a constraint, but a canvas, and you, just by observing, are painting on it. Think about your memories. You assume they reflect the past, but they're unstable. They evolve with time. They shift when you re-remember them. Isn't it strange that your brain updates the past based on what you now know? You're literally editing your timeline. Now scale that up to quantum reality. Maybe memory isn't the only thing being rewritten. Maybe reality does it too. Maybe the past is more like clay than stone. Which brings us to a bigger question. If the future can change the past, then what even counts as real? That's where quantum information theory comes in. In this field, information isn't destroyed, it's conserved, which means everything that could happen still exists somewhere, in some form. Reality isn't what you see, it's what you observe into existence. And what you don't look at? It stays in a kind of limbo, a cloud of probabilities, waiting for your attention to solidify it. Now imagine that this applies not just to particles, but to your life, to decisions, to regrets, to hopes. What you focus on becomes real. What you ignore remains potential. And if that sounds like science fiction, consider this. Even mainstream physics, from MIT to CERN, is now exploring closed time-like curves where particles loop back in time. It's no longer if time travel is possible, it's how. And we're already testing it at the quantum level. Here's a thought. What if time isn't broken? What if it was never linear to begin with? What if we, with our limited perception, just needed it to feel like a line? So we could survive, choose, act. Maybe the arrow of time is a survival mechanism, a necessary illusion. So now, let me ask you this. If the past isn't fixed, if the future is already written, and if your consciousness is what connects the two, then who are you? Not just a person in time. Maybe you are time, a loop, a ripple, a wave collapsing in on itself, aware of its own unfolding. And once you accept that, everything changes. The way you remember, the way you act, the way you exist. Because maybe it's not about finding the truth. Maybe it's about realizing you were always part of it. So, if time doesn't flow the way we thought, if the future shapes the past, and if your consciousness is part of that equation, then maybe we've been asking the wrong questions all along. Maybe it's not about what time is. Maybe it's about what it does to you. And here's a final thought to leave you with. If reality adapts based on your observation, if your choices echo across timelines you'll never consciously see, then what happens when you do nothing? What happens when you stop choosing? What happens when you stop looking? The implications are too big for just one video, so keep going. The next video you'll see, right here on your screen, might just unlock the next piece of this puzzle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.